Imagine a world where your morning coffee costs $10, your commute is a luxury you can barely afford, and the global economy is hanging by a single invisible thread. That thread is just 21 miles wide. It's the Strait of Hormuz. For decades, we've called it the world's most important oil artery, but today it's a graveyard of ships. I'm standing at a vantage point overlooking these waters, and what I see isn't just a blockade. It's the spark of a global Great Depression. Iran hasn't just closed the gate, they've rigged it with sea mines, silent underwater predators that are currently holding the entire world hostage. I remember the day the news broke. It wasn't a massive explosion or a declared war that started the panic. It was a series of pings on sonar screens and the sudden, eerie silence of ship engines. As a maritime analyst who has spent years tracking these waters, I watched the live tracking maps go dark. One by one, the massive supertankers carrying 20% of the world's oil supply simply stopped. They didn't turn back. They froze. Why? Because underneath the waves, Iran has deployed an asymmetric nightmare. These aren't your grandfather's rusty metal balls from World War II. We're talking about smart mines, stealthy, acoustic-triggered devices that can distinguish between a small fishing boat and a massive crude carrier. For a captain, entering these waters right now isn't a job. It's a suicide mission. The reality hit the markets within hours. I watched the oil tickers turn blood red as Brent Crude bypassed $120 a barrel almost instantly. But this isn't just about gas prices. If you look at the logistics, the Strait of Hormuz is the exit door for the Middle East's energy. With that door slammed shut and booby-trapped, the just-in-time supply chain our modern world relies on has officially snapped. I've seen the reports. Insurance premiums for ships in the Gulf have spiked by 500%. No company is willing to risk a billion-dollar vessel against a $5,000 mine. We are looking at a total economic blackout. And the scariest part, this is exactly what Iran planned for. I've spent a lot of time analyzing Iran's military doctrine, and what people don't realize is that they don't need a massive navy to win this fight. They've perfected the art of the invisible wall. While the U.S. Fifth Fleet is patrolling nearby with the most sophisticated destroyers on the planet, they're facing a ghost. These sea mines are essentially the IEDs of the ocean. I've seen the specs on some of these newer models, the EM-52 types. They sit on the seabed, completely silent, waiting for the specific acoustic signature of a Western tanker. They don't even need to hit the hull. The pressure wave alone from an underwater detonation can snap a ship's keel like a toothpick. Standing on the shoreline, you realize the sheer scale of the psychological warfare at play here. It's not just about the mines that are there. It's about the ones that might be there. Iran's Revolutionary Guard knows that for every real mine they drop, they create 1,000 square miles of no-go zones. I spoke with a veteran minesweeper captain recently, and he told me that clearing a path through a modern minefield isn't a weekend job. It's a months-long, agonizingly slow process. Every hour the strait remains dark, the global economy loses billions. We aren't just talking about a temporary fuel hike anymore. We're talking about the total collapse of manufacturing in Europe and Asia. The ripple effect is what keeps me up at night. I'm looking at data showing that the power grids in several major cities are already bracing for impact because they rely on liquefied natural gas, LNG, that comes through this exact passage. If those tankers don't move, the lights go out. This is the ultimate leverage. Iran has effectively turned a narrow strip of water into a financial guillotine, and right now, the world's neck is right under the blade. They've proven that you don't need to win a traditional sea battle to bring a superpower to its knees. You just need to make the cost of moving an inch too high to pay. This leads us to the most terrifying part of the equation, the deadlock. I've been tracking the military movements in the region, and it's a high-stakes game of chicken where nobody can afford to blink. The U.S. and its allies have moved in their mine countermeasure ships, but here's the problem. Those ships are slow, vulnerable, and incredibly easy targets for Iran's swarms of fast attack boats and shore-based missiles. I'm seeing reports of wolf pack tactics, where small, armed speedboats harass the very vessels trying to clear the path. It's a tactical nightmare. If the minesweepers get hit, the strait stays closed. If the U.S. retaliates by striking the Iranian mainland, we aren't just looking at a blockade anymore. We're looking at a full-scale regional war that would send oil prices past $200 a barrel. I sat down with a global macro strategist yesterday, and the forecast is grim. He called it the economic heart attack. Most people think a Great Depression starts with a stock market crash, but in the modern age, it starts with energy. When the energy stops flowing, the food stops moving. I'm already seeing the logistics chains for fertilizers and grain being rerouted, but there's no easy way around the Cape of Good Hope. It adds weeks to the journey and millions to the cost. We are talking about a systemic failure where the cost of living outpaces wages by a factor of 5. This is the sea mine effect. It's a silent explosion that levels the global middle class without a single bomb dropping on a city. As I look out over the horizon, the silence of the water is deceptive. Beneath that blue surface, a technology as simple as a floating explosive is rewriting the rules of the 21st century. The geopolitical leverage has shifted. For years, we thought globalization made us invincible, but it actually made us fragile. We built a world where everything depends on this one narrow exit, and now we're realizing that Iran holds the keys to that lock. The question isn't just how we clear the mines, it's whether the global economy can survive, the time it takes to do it. We are standing on the precipice of a new era, one where energy security is no longer a buzzword, but a matter of national survival. But here is the real kicker, something most analysts are too afraid to say out loud. There is no plan B. For years, we've heard about pipelines that could bypass the strait, cutting across the desert to the Red Sea. I've looked at the capacity of those pipes, and they are essentially trying to fit a gallon of water through a straw. They can only handle a fraction of what the tankers carry. As I walk through the halls of these think tanks, the mood has shifted from how do we fix this to how do we survive this? We are witnessing the end of the era of cheap, reliable energy and the beginning of a desperate scramble for resources. I'm seeing the first signs of civil unrest in countries thousands of miles away from the Persian Gulf. In parts of Southeast Asia and Africa, the skyrocketing cost of transport has already made basic staples like rice and flour unaffordable. This is the Great Depression part of the story. It starts at the pump, moves to the grocery store, and ends with the collapse of social orders. I've been analyzing the satellite imagery of the ports, and the backlog is staggering. Thousands of containers are sitting idle, filled with electronics, car parts, and medical supplies, all because the ships that should be picking them up are stuck on the wrong side of a minefield. It's a chilling reminder of how thin the veneer of civilization really is. We live in a digital world, but we are still powered by physical molecules that have to pass through a specific point in the ocean. Iran knows that they don't have to sink every ship. They just have to prove that they can. As I watch the sunset over the Gulf, the water looks calm, but the tension is electric. Every shadow on the sonar, every unidentified floating object sends a shockwave through the global financial heart. We are no longer waiting for the crisis to happen. We are living in it, and the underwater chessboard has never looked more dangerous. The end game of this blockade isn't just about the oil, it's about the shift in who actually runs the world. As I monitor the secure communications coming out of the region, it's clear that the traditional superpower rules have been burned. For decades, the U.S. Navy guaranteed the safety of these seas, but now a handful of low-cost, high-tech mines have neutralized billions of dollars in aircraft carriers. I'm seeing a massive shift in global alliances right before my eyes. Countries that used to rely on Western protection are now frantically making back-channel deals with Tehran, desperate to get their specific tankers a haul pass through the minefields. It's a total breakdown of the international order. I was looking at the latest inflation maps, and the colors are turning a shade of purple I've never seen before. We are entering a period of hyper-stagnation. It's a scenario where the economy stops growing because it physically cannot move, yet prices keep climbing because the scarcity is real. I've interviewed small business owners who are already shutting their doors because they can't predict their costs from one week to the next. When the Strait of Hormuz is choked, it doesn't just stop the flow of oil, it stops the flow of confidence. And once confidence in the global market is gone, you can't just minesweep it back into existence. The most haunting image of this entire crisis isn't an explosion. It's the sight of the world's largest vessels anchored, rusting, and waiting for an all clear that might not come for months. I can see the lights of these ghost ships from the coast at night, stretching out into the horizon like a floating city of the stranded. This is the new reality of 21st century warfare. It's silent, it's underwater, and it hits you in the wallet before it ever hits you in the heart. We are watching the gears of the modern world grind to a halt, and as of right now, no one has the master key to start them back up. The sea mines didn't just block a waterway, they triggered a countdown for the global economy, and the clock is ticking faster than anyone realizes. As I stand here, looking at the empty horizon where the world's most powerful fleet once stood unchallenged, I realize that we aren't just looking at a military standoff, we are looking at the funeral of the old world order. The Great Depression of the 1930s was triggered by a banking collapse. But this one was triggered by the ocean. I'm seeing reports of energy rationing being discussed in the highest levels of government. Imagine a world where your electricity is only on for 4 hours a day because the fuel to run the plants is trapped behind a line of sea mines that cost less than a luxury car. I've been tracking the diplomatic cables, and the desperation is palpable. There's a term in naval strategy called sea denial, and Iran has executed it perfectly. They don't have to control the water, they just have to make it unusable for everyone else. It's the ultimate scorched earth policy, but applied to the sea. The ripple effect has now reached the heart of the global financial system. The stock markets aren't just dipping, they are dissolving. I'm watching the collapse of pension funds and savings accounts because the industries they were built on, shipping, manufacturing, travel, simply don't have the fuel to function. The scariest thought I have tonight, watching the dark waves hit the shore, is how fragile we really were. We built a high-tech digital civilization on a foundation of 19th century shipping lanes. All it took to bring us to the brink of a global Great Depression wasn't a nuclear bomb or a cyber attack. It was a few hundred sea mines and the strategic geography of a single narrow strait. As the world waits for a solution that might not exist, one thing is certain. The world we wake up to when this blockade finally ends will be unrecognizable from the one we knew. The silent war beneath the surface has already won. This brings us to the final chilling reality of this crisis, the point of no return. I've been analyzing the historical data of past economic shocks, and they all have one thing in common: a recovery period. But this is different. When you paralyze the global heart for this long, the damage becomes permanent. I'm seeing massive corporations that have existed for a century filing for bankruptcy because they simply cannot bridge the gap. We are witnessing a great reset, but not the kind anyone wanted. It's a reset back to a world where geography once again dictates destiny. And right now, that destiny is being written in the depths of the strait. I'm looking at the latest intelligence feeds, and there's a new development. It's not just about the mines anymore, it's about the shadow fleet. Small, unidentified vessels are reportedly moving through the minefields with ease, likely guided by the very people who laid them. This creates a two-tiered world: those who can pay the toll to Iran, and the rest of the world that is left to starve in the dark. It's a protection racket on a planetary scale. I've reached out to my contacts in maritime security, and they're saying the same thing. The sea mine blockade has effectively turned the Persian Gulf into a private lake. As I wrap up my observations from this vantage point, the gravity of the situation is heavy. We used to think of sea mines as relics of the past, but they have become the most effective weapon of the future. They are the great equalizers that have brought the most powerful economies to a standstill. Whether the blockade is lifted tomorrow or next year, the psychological scar is deep. The world has seen how easy it is to break the system. We are standing at the dawn of a global Great Depression, and as the tides come in, they bring with them the realization that our modern world was always just one ping away from total collapse. The silence of the Strait of Hormuz is the loudest warning we've ever received. But what if the blockade never truly ends? That's the question haunting every war room and central bank right now. I've been looking at the long-term projections, and the math is terrifying. Even if every mine were deactivated tonight, the risk premium has fundamentally changed the DNA of global trade. We're seeing a massive deglobalization happen in real time. Countries are pulling inward, hoarding resources, and realizing that depending on a single vulnerable choke point was a historical mistake. I'm standing here watching the sunset, and it feels like I'm watching the sunset on the era of global connectivity itself. I've just received a leaked memo from a major shipping conglomerate, and they are officially abandoning the route for the foreseeable future. They aren't waiting for the mines to be cleared. They are selling off their tankers. When the big players give up, you know the game has changed. This is how the global Great Depression cements itself, not through a single crash, but through the permanent loss of infrastructure. The sea mines didn't just target steel hulls, they targeted the very idea of a borderless economy. As I look out at the water one last time, the lesson is clear. We were so focused on the high-tech future that we forgot how easily a low-tech shadow from the past could pull the plug on everything. The Strait of Hormuz is more than a waterway now. It's a monument to our fragility. Iran's gamble has proven that in the modern age, the power to destroy is far cheaper than the power to build. We are entering a cold, dark chapter of history where the lights may stay dimmed for a long time. The global economy is gasping for air. The mines are still waiting in the deep, and the world is finally realizing that the invisible thread has snapped. We aren't just waiting for the end of a blockade. We are learning how to live in the wreckage of what comes after. The most haunting part of this entire ordeal isn't the silence of the ships. It's the realization that the world's superpower status was always dependent on the permission of the geography. As I look through my final sets of data, I see a shift in the global power dynamic that no treaty can fix. The sea mine strategy has effectively decapitated the concept of naval dominance. Why build a billion-dollar destroyer when a few $1,000s worth of submerged explosives can render it useless? This isn't just a local conflict anymore. It's a blueprint for every other choke point on the planet. I'm seeing the first reports of major cities implementing survival economies. This is the hallmark of the global Great Depression Iran has triggered. It's a world of localized markets, extreme rationing, and the collapse of the middle class. I spoke to a colleague in London who told me that for the first time in generations, people are truly afraid of the winter. This is the human cost of a blocked strait. It's not just a line on a map, it's the warmth in your home, the food on your plate, and the stability of your government. The sea mines have successfully turned the ocean into a wall, and on the other side of that wall, the modern world is starving. As the moon rises over these contested waters, I can't help but think about the irony of it all. We spent trillions on cyber defense and space-age technology, but we were brought to our knees by a weapon that sits in the mud and waits. The Strait of Hormuz has become a graveyard, not just for ships, but for the dream of a globalized, stable world. The blockade might one day be cleared, and the mines might eventually be swept, but the world will never trust these waters again. The depression has started, the pieces on the board have moved, and as I walk away from the shore, I realize that we are now living in the shadow of the mines. The invisible thread is gone, and we are all just drifting in the dark. So, where do we go from here? As I look at the final intelligence briefings crossing my desk, the conclusion is unavoidable. We've entered the age of scarcity. This isn't a temporary glitch in the system. It's a fundamental breakdown. I'm seeing the blueprints for new, localized trade routes being drawn up, but they will take decades to build. In the meantime, the global economy is functioning like a patient on life support, with the Strait of Hormuz acting as the hand that controls the oxygen. The Sea mines haven't just disrupted trade, they've forced every nation to choose between total submission or total collapse. I'm watching the final flickers of light from the tankers on the horizon, ships that have now become floating warehouses of rotting cargo. It's a surreal sight, the pinnacle of human engineering rendered completely impotent by a primitive, submerged threat. This is the ultimate lesson of the blockade. Complexity is a vulnerability. We built a world so interconnected, so reliant on precision and just-in-time delivery, that we forgot how to handle a blunt force trauma. Iran didn't need to outsmart us, they just needed to stop us. And by stopping the flow of oil, they stopped the heart of the modern world. Suddenly, my satellite phone buzzes, an emergency broadcast from a restricted channel. My blood turns cold. The pings aren't just coming from the strait anymore. New signatures are appearing near the Suez Canal and the Strait of Malacca. It wasn't just one choke point, it was a coordinated global synchronization. As I look back at the dark water, a massive explosion rips through the night sky on the horizon. One of the ghost ships just hit a mine, and the fireball is so bright it looks like a second sun rising over a dying world. The ground beneath me seems to tremble, not from the blast, but from the realization that this was never meant to be a negotiation. It was an execution. The global economy isn't just resetting, it's being erased. I hear the distant, low hum of drones overhead, not ours. I realize then that being a witness is the most dangerous job in the world right now. I look down at my screen one last time. The global market feed has flatlined. No numbers, no red, no green. Just a single word flashing in white text. Disconnected. I turn to run, but the shoreline is no longer empty. Shadows are moving in the surf. The silent war has finally come to the surface. I thought I was watching the end of an era from a safe distance, but as the first blackout hits the city behind me, plunging millions into total darkness, I realize there is no safe distance anymore. The mines didn't just stay in the water. They've reached the heart of everything we built. The last thing I see before my own flashlight flickers out is the silhouette of a world that just ran out of time. The Great Depression was only the beginning. This is the end of the line.